My wife lied about being pregnant after I supported her surgery, so I left silently, and what happened next shattered her entire life. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I thought I had finally found the love of my life. Her name is Sarah. From the moment I met her, something about her just clicked. Her laugh, the way she carried herself, that spark in her eyes when she talked about her dreams. She was ambitious, confident, and somehow caring in a way that felt rare. I remember thinking, finally, someone I can trust, someone I can actually build a life with. Early on, we were inseparable. I'd support her emotionally when she got stressed over work or family, listen for hours while she vented about the smallest inconveniences, and I didn't mind. I even helped her financially when she needed it, never anything huge, just enough to ease a temporary burden. She always seemed grateful, and I felt like I was making a difference in her life. There was this glow about our relationship, this sense of honesty and loyalty I hadn't felt before. I thought we were building something real, but even in those first months, I started noticing small things. The little inconsistencies in her stories, the tiny contradictions I'd catch if I paid attention. She'd say one thing one week, then somehow it would change without explanation. I brushed it off. I told myself I was overthinking, that nobody's perfect, that maybe I just wanted everything to be flawless so badly that I was imagining flaws. Still, there were moments that niggled at me, a hesitation in her voice when she spoke about past relationships, a subtle defensiveness if I asked too many questions. Small things I couldn't quite put my finger on, but I ignored them. I convinced myself that love was about trust, and I trusted her completely. I thought that as long as I stayed attentive, supportive, and honest, everything else would fall into place. Looking back, those tiny inconsistencies were the first whispers of trouble. But at the time, they barely registered. I was too blinded by how perfect I believed she was. I was falling deeper every day, utterly convinced that nothing could shake what we had. And then, one evening, she said something that sounded off, but I laughed it away, not knowing that was the first thread of a much bigger unraveling. A few months later, Sarah had to undergo surgery for a minor health issue. It wasn't life-threatening, but it scared her, and honestly, it scared me too. I took time off work, rearranged my schedule, and made sure she had everything she needed: meals, rides to appointments, someone to sit with her after surgery. I felt a strange mix of pride and fear, proud that I could be there for her, but anxious that something might go wrong. The hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic, and I remember the hum of machines in the background while she slept under the anesthesia. Trusting me to hold everything together, I didn't just support her physically. I held her emotionally too. She'd grip my hand in the recovery room, eyes wide and voice trembling, whispering, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I believed her. I believed every word. I thought that moments like this, moments when you see someone vulnerable, solidify trust and love. I told her it was nothing, that I was happy to be there, that she didn't owe me anything. Friends and family noticed. They'd text me, teasingly call me a super husband or too good to be true, and I'd just laugh. I wanted to feel like a good partner, like the kind of man someone could rely on completely. But even in those moments of intimacy and care, there were little things that felt off. She'd sometimes glance at her phone nervously, or change the subject when I asked casual questions about her recovery. Nothing concrete, just fleeting moments that left a strange taste in my mouth. I brushed them off every time. I told myself, this is just stress. Surgery is scary. People act differently when they're scared. But deep down, a tiny part of me started wondering, why did some of her reassurances feel rehearsed, almost like she was performing calmness for my sake? I pushed the thought away. I wanted to trust her, to believe our love was as solid as I felt it was. And yet, that little whisper of doubt would grow louder in ways I couldn't yet imagine, starting with something she told me one evening while we were sitting on the couch, her hand resting lightly on mine. It was about a week after she'd fully recovered from surgery when Sarah dropped the bombshell. She looked at me, her eyes wide and shimmering, and said, "I think I'm pregnant." For a split second, my chest tightened and my mind went blank. I couldn't believe it. After everything, the surgery, the late nights, the stress, It felt like a miracle. I smiled before I even realized it, reaching out to hold her hands, trying to steady my racing heart. "I'm serious," she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't expect it, but "I think this is our baby." My mind spun with possibilities. A nursery, late-night feedings, first steps, family dinners. I was overwhelmed, but in the best way. My head filled with dreams I hadn't allowed myself to imagine yet. I felt like life had finally handed me something tangible, a symbol of the love we shared. I threw myself into it completely. I read parenting books in secret, rearranged our apartment for a nursery corner, and even started budgeting differently, planning for baby clothes, diapers, and all the little things I thought we'd need. Friends and family celebrated with us, sending congratulations and advice. Every smile from Sarah felt like a validation, like proof that everything I'd done for her mattered, that supporting her, trusting her, had been worth it. But even in the excitement, there were moments I couldn't ignore. Occasionally, she'd flinch at questions about timing or tests. Sometimes, she'd laugh nervously when I mentioned ultrasound appointments or prenatal vitamins. I noticed these tiny cracks, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe in her, in us, in the life we were supposedly creating. Then came the night she sat me down on the couch. Holding my hand a little tighter than usual, her voice soft but intense. "I need you to promise me you'll always be here, no matter what," she said. There was urgency in her tone, almost a plea, and while I nodded eagerly, a tiny whisper of unease snuck into my chest. I didn't know it yet, but that moment would mark the first ripple in a tidal wave that was about to crash down on everything I believed about her and about us. At first, everything seemed perfect. I was wrapped up in the idea of becoming a dad, picturing Sarah cradling a tiny baby, imagining weekends at the park, family dinners, laughter echoing through our home. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started feeling off. Small inconsistencies began creeping into our daily life. She'd tell me one story about a conversation with her doctor, and then a week later, a slightly different version would slip out. I caught myself questioning her gently, only for her to give a tight-lipped smile and say, "You're reading too much into things." And I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Her behavior shifted in subtler ways too. She'd get defensive when I asked about appointments, or sometimes she'd vanish for a few minutes with her phone and come back with a vague excuse. At first, I shrugged it off. Pregnancy can make people moody, I told myself. She was under stress, emotional highs and lows, hormones, everything. And yet, those fleeting moments left a strange pit in my stomach that I couldn't shake. I began noticing it more in social settings. Friends would mention things like, "Wow, you two are going to be amazing parents," and she'd respond with forced laughter or quickly change the subject. I'd glance at her and catch that flicker of unease in her eyes. And each time, I pushed it down, telling myself again that I was imagining it. I wanted the story we were building to be true, so badly that I ignored the little alarms ringing in my head. Then came a conversation with a mutual friend, innocuous at first. She casually mentioned something that didn't add up. Comments Sarah had made to her about the pregnancy that contradicted what she'd told me. My stomach dropped. I laughed nervously, thinking, maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm just paranoid. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction, every inconsistency, every defensive glance. Something didn't feel right, and as I lay there staring at the ceiling, I had no idea that the next few weeks would peel back layers of lies so deep that nothing I believed about Sarah nor our future would ever feel safe again. Over the next few weeks, life became a balancing act between excitement and suspicion. I was preparing for a baby that, at least on the surface, should have brought nothing but joy. But every interaction with Sarah now carried this invisible weight, a tension I couldn't ignore. She smiled at me, held my hand, whispered about our future, yet those smiles didn't always reach her eyes. And sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, I caught that flash of something: hesitation, guilt, maybe even fear that left my chest tight. I began defending her to friends and family without thinking. When they made casual comments about her behavior, or jokingly asked if everything was going smoothly, I felt almost protective. She stressed, I'd say, brushing off my own unease. I wanted to believe the best of her. I wanted to trust her because imagining otherwise was too painful. My days were spent making preparations, buying baby books, reading about nursery ideas, setting up a small corner in our apartment while mentally ignoring the tiny alarms that refused to go away. Sarah, of course, seemed to sense my willingness to overlook her quirks. The tension between us shifted into something more controlling, subtle but palpable. She started hinting at things like, "I hope you'll always be there for me, no matter what I need, or I can't handle stress without you." Every word felt layered, like she was testing the limits of my devotion. I nodded, laughed nervously, told myself it was normal pregnancy talk. But the pit in my stomach kept growing. Then came a moment that hit harder than anything before. I overheard a friend mention something odd about Sarah's past. A story that seemed out of place. Something she had never shared with me. My stomach sank. I wanted to confront her immediately, to demand the truth, but something in me hesitated. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to discover something that would change everything I thought I knew about her. That night, as I lay on the couch, staring at the muted glow of the city outside our window, a cold dread crept in. I felt the first real fear in months, not just for myself, but for the life I thought we were building. And I didn't know it yet, but what I was about to uncover would shatter everything I trusted. It started with a small mistake, one I almost overlooked. I was tidying up her side of the desk when I noticed a folder tucked under some papers. Curiosity got the better of me. Inside were medical records, dated weeks before she told me she was pregnant. The documents clearly showed no signs of pregnancy. My hands shook. My chest tightened. My mind screamed, "This can't be real." She wouldn't lie about something like this, would she? I confronted her gently at first, hoping it was a misunderstanding. "Sarah, I found these records," I said, my voice trembling, trying to keep calm. They don't match what you've been telling me." She looked at me, eyes wide, a flicker of panic crossing her face, then quickly smoothed over with a practiced calm. I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You must be misunderstanding something." But I wasn't misunderstanding. Every detail I had trusted, every dream I had been building in my head, suddenly felt fragile, like it had been constructed from smoke. I could feel anger bubbling under the surface, mingling with heartbreak. I wanted to shout, to demand answers. But I also wanted to understand why the motive behind something so cruel. The next few days were torturous. I watched her, searching for cracks, for signs of guilt, for a hint of honesty. She continued her charade flawlessly, laughing at jokes, holding my hand, whispering about the baby. But I couldn't stop noticing the tiny slips, the way she flinched at certain questions, how her smiles sometimes faltered when I wasn't looking. It was all so deliberate. And for the first time, the trust I had clung to so tightly began to crumble completely. That was the moment I realized something crucial. This wasn't a small lie, a white lie, or an accident. This was calculated. She had crafted a story that preyed on my love, my loyalty, my desire to protect her. And as the shock settled in, I knew I had a choice. I could confront her head-on, risk a screaming match, or I could step back, gather the pieces quietly, and decide my next move carefully. And I chose silence for now. But what I was planning next would unravel everything she thought she had. Under control? After discovering the truth, I didn't confront her immediately. I stopped asking questions, stopped looking for reassurance, and instead began watching quietly. Every word, every gesture, every fleeting glance, everything became data. I documented it mentally, memorized patterns, the subtle manipulations. She used to control conversations, the way she leaned on guilt like a crutch. Outwardly, I stayed calm. I smiled when she smiled, held her hand when she reached for mine, laughed at her jokes, but inside, I was withdrawing piece by piece. It was exhausting. This double life of showing love while feeling betrayal gnawing at me from within. I started noticing all the little things I had ignored before her. Late-night texts that she claimed were from friends. the evasive answers when I asked about doctor visits, even her sudden defensiveness whenever I mentioned future plans. Each inconsistency, each tiny manipulation, confirmed what I already knew. She had lied, and she had done it with intent, and yet I didn't react openly. I couldn't. There was a strange sense of power in my silence. She grew restless, started probing, trying to pull me back into the emotional chaos she relied on. "Why are you so distant?" she asked one evening, voice soft but edged with tension. I shrugged, keeping my tone casual. "I don't know, just tired, I guess." She pressed further, but I deflected, carefully avoiding revealing that I already knew everything. As the days passed, the stress of pretending to trust her weighed heavily on me. My mind was constantly calculating, thinking 3-4 steps ahead. I began reaching out to friends discreetly, gathering advice, and even looking into legal options, just to ensure I had a safety net. And through it all, I remained outwardly supportive, a loving partner, all while silently preparing for the day when the truth could no longer be contained. But the most painful part was the emotional isolation. I felt like I was living in two worlds, one with Sarah, the facade of love and normalcy, and one inside my head, where trust had shattered and anger simmered quietly. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized just how deep her deception went, and how far I'd have to go to reclaim my life. It hit me like a punch I didn't see coming, the absolute bottom. I thought I had prepared myself, stayed calm, kept my emotions in check, but one night, alone in our apartment, I finally let it all crash down. I sat on the couch, staring at the muted glow of the city outside, feeling hollow and defeated. Every plan I'd made, every dream I'd held close about family and a future with Sarah, felt like it had been built on sand. I couldn't escape the betrayal. It was everywhere, suffocating, like the air itself had turned heavy. Sarah came in later, laughing softly at something on her phone, unaware or maybe intentionally ignorant of the storm raging inside me. She flopped onto the couch next to me, nudged my shoulder playfully, and whispered, "You've been so quiet lately. You upset with me?" Her eyes searched mine, pretending innocence, and I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her feel just a fraction of the devastation I was drowning in. Instead, I swallowed the anger, the heartbreak, the nausea, and forced a smile. "I'm fine," I muttered, voice barely audible. That night, I cried alone for the first time in years. Not just for the lie she had told, but for the life I thought we had together. Every memory now felt tainted. Every touch, suspect. I questioned everything about myself. How could I have been so blind, so naive? I felt humiliated, violated, like someone had stolen my trust and twisted it into a weapon against me. I even considered confronting her then and there, screaming, demanding answers, but part of me knew it wouldn't bring relief. She thrived on chaos and guilt. The thought of giving her that power terrified me more than the lie itself. Instead, I sat in silence, letting the reality of the betrayal wash over me, letting myself hit rock bottom fully. I felt stripped bare, powerless, like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. And yet, even in that darkness, a tiny spark remained, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to turn all of this around, to reclaim my life, and to make her face the consequences of everything she had done. That bottom, I realized, screaming or confronting Sarah wouldn't give me control. It would give her the chaos she thrived on. So I started planning quietly. Every interaction, every conversation, every subtle manipulation she used, I cataloged it all in my head. I documented the lies, the inconsistencies, the ways she twisted my love for her into blind devotion. I even started saving emails, texts, and receipts, small pieces of evidence that could prove her deception if I ever needed them. I stopped reacting emotionally to her ploys when she tried to guilt me with a sigh, a pleading look, or the faintest edge of hurt in her voice. I smiled, nodded, and kept moving forward. I noticed she grew restless, flustered, and a little careless, tiny cracks in her carefully constructed facade. I could see it in the way she avoided certain topics, how her laughter occasionally faltered, how she glanced at her phone with tension instead of ease. At the same time, I fortified myself emotionally. I reached out to close friends, carefully letting them in without revealing too much. I got advice, confirmed that what I felt wasn't paranoia, quietly researched legal options, just in case I had to protect myself. The sense of power that came from preparation was intoxicating, a sharp contrast to the helplessness I had felt before. Even in public, I maintained the role of the devoted partner walking beside her, laughing at her jokes, holding her hand. All while internally, I was preparing for the moment the truth could no longer be ignored. Every lie she told now became fuel for the plan I was quietly building. It's a way to reclaim the life she had tried to hijack. And as I watched her begin to slip small mistakes, inconsistencies, flashes of panic, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and anticipation. The stage was set. I wasn't reacting blindly anymore. I was in control, biding my time, and deep down I knew that when the moment came, everything she thought she had manipulated would come crashing down. But I also knew that the final unraveling was coming sooner than she imagined. The confrontation didn't happen the way anyone would expect. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I waited until a quiet evening when it was just the two of us in the apartment. And I laid everything out calmly, meticulously, like a courtroom case. I placed the medical records, the contradictory texts, the dates she had lied about, every piece of evidence on the table in front of her. Her eyes widened at first, and flickered with panic, and finally hardened with anger. You went through my things," she stammered, voice sharp but shaky. "I trusted you." I shook my head slowly. "I trusted you too." This," I said. "Tapping the papers is what you did with it." She tried to gaslight me at first, weaving excuses, claiming confusion, blaming stress, pretending innocence. But I stayed calm, unflinching. Every word she used to twist the situation back onto me only exposed her deeper. I reminded her of every inconsistency, every manipulation, every lie. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg for honesty. I simply presented the truth piece by piece, letting the weight of her own deceit fall on her. Then came the moment that made her stumble completely. I revealed a timeline of her actions backed by screenshots and receipts, showing not only that the pregnancy was fake, but that she had calculated exactly how to trap me emotionally and financially. Her breath caught, her facade crumbled, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, the same way I had felt months ago. I let the silence sit, heavy and suffocating. She searched my face for mercy, for any sign I might forgive, but there was none. The power had shifted completely. I had been silent for months, biding my time, and now the full weight of reality was crashing down on her, and as she sank into the realization of what she had done, control she had wielded so confidently. For so long I felt something I hadn't felt in months: clarity, relief, and the first spark of peace. But even in that moment, I knew this confrontation was only the beginning. After the confrontation, everything began to unravel for Sarah. The friends and family who had once praised her suddenly looked at her differently. Word spread quietly. At first, about the lies, the manipulation, the fake pregnancy. People who had blindly supported her started asking questions, and the cracks in her carefully curated image widened. I stayed mostly silent, letting the truth speak for itself, watching as the consequences she had avoided for so long finally caught up with her. Her attempts to regain control were weak and obvious. She tried apologizing, trying to charm her way back into trust. But no one was buying it anymore. Not our friends, not our families. The pity she had relied on evaporated, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. I watched a strange mix of satisfaction and melancholy in my chest as the walls she had built around her lies crumbled. Financially, socially, emotionally, she was losing the grip she had used to manipulate me for months. People who had once laughed at my devotion now admired my restraint, my calm, my ability to reclaim control. Sarah, meanwhile, had nothing left to lean on but excuses and empty words. Every attempt to explain, to justify, to gaslight fell flat. She had underestimated the power of evidence, of patience, and of a carefully planned withdrawal. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding my life quietly. The emotional weight I had carried for months lifted slowly. I began to sleep better, to think clearly, to plan for a future where I wasn't constantly second-guessing every smile or word. The relief wasn't instantaneous, it never is, but it was real, and it was mine. And though the betrayal had left scars, I realized something important. The peace I was finding wasn't in revenge or confrontation. It was in reclaiming myself. I had survived her lies, her manipulation, and her control. Life continued to spiral in ways she had created for herself. I felt a strange sense of justice, a quiet, powerful closure that didn't need to be loud or violent to be complete. But the story wasn't over yet, because the final piece of reckoning was still waiting, hidden in plain sight, in the weeks that followed. I finally felt like I could breathe again. The chaos Sarah had created had settled into something manageable. The betrayals, the lies, the sleepless nights, they were still there, etched into memory, but they no longer controlled me. I began focusing on myself, rebuilding routines, connecting with friends who truly mattered, and slowly reclaiming the life that had been hijacked by her deception. I thought a lot about trust, about love, and about what it really means to be loyal, not blindly, but wisely. I realized that my pain had been compounded not only by her lies, but by my own willingness to ignore the little warnings. The subtle inconsistencies I had brushed aside for the sake of hope. And though it hurt to admit, that lesson was invaluable. I would never allow anyone to manipulate my love or my trust again, Sarah, on the other hand, continued to face the fallout. The people she had counted on for validation withdrew. Her lies had created isolation, and for the first time, she was forced to confront the emptiness she had cultivated. She tried subtle attempts at redemption, apologies, excuses, explanations. But by then, I had already stepped far enough away. I wasn't invested in her anymore. I was invested in myself. And in that investment, I found a strange kind of peace. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, it wasn't revenge or public humiliation, but it was stronger than anything I had felt before. I felt empowered, healed, and in control of my life once again. I knew that she had lost something far greater than I ever had, my trust, my belief in her, and the place she once held in my world. Looking back, I understand now that the deepest betrayals reveal not just the flaws of others, but the strength within ourselves. I survived her lies, her manipulation, and the heartbreak. I emerged wiser, stronger, and more certain of who I am and what I will never allow again. And as I stand in the quiet of my reclaimed life, I finally feel free of deceit, free of fear, and free to trust again. This time in a way that no one could ever exploit.